For the longest time, the Los Angeles Clippers were probably the most miserable NBA franchise of all time. They were only known for notoriously awful ownership, non-stop losing, and always being seen as a little brother to the Lakers. While Big Brother had won 16 NBA championships, Little Brother hadn't even made it to the conference finals by this point. Since the team moved to LA in 1984, they had only made the playoffs 4 times, with the most recent appearance being in 2006. This 2006 run was also the only time the team had made it out of the first round. Unfortunately, the team could not build on this run and were quickly sent back to the bottom of the league. But things would begin to turn around for LA in 2011. The team would find themselves in the playoffs once again. Along with some solid depth, this team was headlined by 3 guys who would define this era of Clippers basketball. Deandre Jordan, a 2008 second-round pick that was slowly developing into a quality starting center. Blake Griffin, an insanely athletic forward that could put your favorite player on a poster. He also, intentionally or not, gave this era of Clippers basketball its name. Lob City, huh? Who would be throwing the lobs? None other than Chris Paul, a Hall of Fame point guard acquired by questionable circumstances who was spectacular at dropping dimes. These 3 were perfect for each other. But instead of telling you how great they were, I find it better just to show you.
Ranger for 3. Oh, jam by Blake Griffin! 10 points. Oh, Blake Griffin! That's a man's jam! And here we go again. The line, the jam, are you kidding me? The kids are having fun. The players are having fun. 3 starters. Oh, what a move, what a spin, and what a dunk! Woo. Here comes Chris Paul. The lob. The jam! Oh, what a monster jam by Deandre Jordan!
The Lob City era could be described as exciting and flashy. This was the most relevant the Clippers had ever been, and it finally seemed like Los Angeles was their city. But when looking back at this stretch, it could be seen as disappointing. The Clippers were fun to watch, and they made the playoffs every year, but they never made it past the second round during this era due to a mix of choking and injuries. The ultimate goal was to win a championship, but that never came to be. 2017 was the final year of the Lob City era, and it ended with similar results as the previous years. Losing Blake Griffin after 3 games would all but be the nail in the coffin for LA, as they were defeated in 7 games by the Jazz. It was clear that the direction of the Clippers wasn't ideal. Sure, they were still winning, but they weren't really championship favorites anymore. The rise of the Golden State Warriors eliminated any chance of the Clippers winning a title with this core. The first domino would fall in June of 2017, when Chris Paul was traded to the Houston Rockets for an assortment of role players and a 2018 first-round pick. This happened because Paul wanted a max extension, but the Clippers didn't want to commit to paying the 32-year-old an average of $40 million a year over the next 5 years. Fast forward to the next year, and none of these 3 would be in Los Angeles. Today, we'll look at what happened to this big 3 after Lob City. Let's start with Deandre Jordan. Throughout the Lob City era, Jordan established himself as one of the better defensive centers in the NBA, being named to the All-Defensive First Team twice. He was also known for cleaning the glass and being one of the best in-game dunkers in the league. I think we've all seen this dunk a time or two. I swear that guy can never catch a break. Jordan even got an All-Star nod in 2017 while also competing in the dunk contest. The year after Paul was traded was actually one of Jordan's best individual years. He averaged 12 points and a career-high 15 rebounds per game, even if his field goal percentage did take a little bit of a hit. Throughout the season, Jordan consistently stuffed the stat sheet. He had multiple 20-20 games, and he scored a career-high 30 points in a 10-point win against the Celtics. It's strange that this was the year that he wasn't named an All-Star, but I guess that could have also been because the Clippers weren't winning as much as they previously had been. See, Chris Paul wasn't the only subtraction from previous years. Multiple fan favorites either left in free agency or were traded, leaving the Clippers with a lot of new, unproven faces. They would find form at the end of the year, but they would still miss the playoffs with a 42-40 record. Jordan wasn't long for LA, as the team tried to work out a sign and trade with Dallas, but that didn't pan out. So, after jumping through a couple hoops, he ended up just signing a 1-year deal with the Mavericks. This was funny because Jordan was supposed to sign with the Mavericks 3 years earlier, but some convincing from his teammates made him go back on his commitment. Jordan was still pretty solid in Dallas, but I'm not really sure that's what the team needed at that point. The Mavs were in a weird place between Dirk's final years and their rise back to relevance with Luka at the helm. I guess they considered him to be expendable though, as this stint in Dallas wouldn't even last a full season. Jordan was shipped to New York along with Dennis Smith Jr. and Wesley Matthews in exchange for a package headlined by All-Star forward Kristaps Porzingis. He was fine in New York, but it wasn't going to lead to anything notable since the Knicks were the worst team in the league. From this point forward, Deandre Jordan would begin to bounce around the league, and his days as a starting center were numbered. He He joined the Nets in the 2019 offseason, stating that he felt the culture of the team was better than that of the Knicks, but I think everyone could see that it was really because the Nets just signed KD and Kyrie. He would have a good game every now and then, but they weren't happening at a consistent rate. His 2020 season ended when he tested positive for COVID and opted out of the NBA bubble, and his 2021 campaign wasn't much better. He went from being a starter to being told to hit the pine. The Nets felt better going with options like Jeff Green, Nick Claxton, and someone who we'll talk about later. He didn't play a single game for the Nets in the 2021 playoffs, and the team re-signing LaMarcus Aldridge meant that Deandre would be playing in a different jersey next year. After a trade and buyout, Jordan signed with the Lakers, another team that was hyped to the moon, but crashed out just as fast. He fell out of the rotation fairly quick, and his only memorable moment would probably be this beautiful Hail Mary pass. He was cut the next day, and a lot of people think this is what did it. His next stop was Philadelphia. This would be another short stint, as he played sparingly in relief of Joel Embiid. Weirdly enough, he would start against the Heat in the second round of the playoffs since Joel Embiid was hurt. This all was very strange, since Paul Reed was probably the better option, but Doc Rivers decided that Deandre Jordan should start in a playoff game in 2022. It's safe to say that these games weren't his best. Jordan's final stop, as of this video, is in the Mile High City. This is exactly where Jordan needs to be at this point in his career. Someone who is primarily on the bench, mentoring the younger guys, and can be occasionally brought in to get a block or a dunk. His first year in Denver would see him and the Nuggets win their first NBA championship, and although it was at the expense of my team, it is still cool to see someone in their 15th season win their first championship. Jordan is still on the Nuggets today, making this his longest stay with the team since his run with the Clippers. And although he wasn't really able to get back to his all-star form, he still had a very successful career. He's played 17 seasons, won a ring, and he also has the NBA record for career field goal percentage. He's had a healthy run that didn't end up with him flaming out after Lob City, which can't exactly be said for the next guy. Blake Griffin was supposed to be the savior of the Los Angeles Clippers. Drafted with the first overall pick in 2009, Griffin looked to be on a Hall of Fame trajectory, despite missing his first season with a knee injury. In his first 5 seasons, he was selected to 5 All-Star games, and he was named to an All-NBA team 4 times as well. He clearly had the highest ceiling out of this big three at the time. His explosive athleticism allowed him to thrive offensively, especially at the rim. It seemed like this dude was putting someone on a poster every night. Griffin and the Clippers were riding high, and it seemed like they could eventually break through if he continued to grow. But by 2015, cracks would begin to form in Griffin's armor. He started to miss more time with injuries, both in the regular season and playoffs, and he looked to have lost a step as a result. Regardless, the Clippers were eager to keep the 28-year-old star heading into the 2018 season. The Clippers brass viewed him as royalty, and they felt more comfortable giving him a large contract over the older, also injury-prone Chris Paul. They ended up signing him to a 5-year, $173 million contract. But it didn't just come after a regular business meeting. They wanted to give this guy all the fixins, presenting him with a fake jersey retirement ceremony to convince him to re-sign. According to Griffin, they went all out, showing him things like childhood pictures, high school championship trophies and medals, and they even had Andra Day perform her song Rise Up with a choir while his jersey was lifted into the rafters. So, they must have really wanted to keep him, right? You would think so. That was until he was traded around 6 months later. Yeah, after basically giving him the DeAndre Jordan chair routine on steroids, they quickly shipped him off to Detroit for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, and a protected first and second round pick. So why trade him if you just gave him everything? Well, I think this could have been a case of buyer's remorse. Griffin was playing alright, but he would once again suffer a long-term injury. After a month on the shelf, he had a nice stretch of games and was traded soon after. I guess the Clippers just wanted to capitalize on his improved play and send him out to a team who felt like they could win with him now. That team wasn't the Clippers, as they were only 25 and 24 before they shipped Griffin out. So it made sense to start fresh instead of fighting for the 7th or 8th seed. I will say that your franchise player finding out that he was traded on Twitter is pretty Bush League though. While not much changed for Griffin or Detroit in his half season in the Motor City, expectations were a bit higher going into the 2019 season. While the Pistons as a team were still mediocre, you certainly could not blame that on Griffin. At 29 years old, he arguably had the best season of his entire career. He had perfectly reinvented his game to fit the modern NBA. He was no longer just a lob catcher. He could still dunk, but he could also create his own shot off the dribble, both at the rim and from beyond the arc. His ball handling was much improved, and he was able to create separation to either drive or hit a nice step-back three. He also had his healthiest season in years, playing in 75 games, which was the most that he had played in 5 years. Some highlights from this year include scoring 50 points in an overtime win over the Sixers, scoring 44 points in his return to LA, and a 37-point outing against the Rockets. Griffin was named to his final All-Star and All-NBA team, and the Pistons were able to do just enough to capture the 8th seed in the 2019 playoffs. Unfortunately, this series would ultimately signal the end for Blake Griffin. He missed the first 2 games of this series against the Bucks due to knee soreness, something that he'd already been dealing with near the end of the regular season. He was able to come back for games 3 and 4, but it wasn't nearly enough to even win 1 game, and it was clear that he still wasn't 100%. Griffin would undergo surgery in the offseason to repair cartilage in his left knee. While this was hoped to be the solution for his recent injury problems, it ended up being like putting a band-aid on a house fire. When he came back after recovering from surgery, his play had taken a nosedive. His efficiency both from the field and from deep both tanked, and he looked a lot slower. After only 18 games, he would injure that same knee, with his impending surgery putting him out for the remainder of the shortened season. The 2021 season looked to be more of the same. Despite expressing confidence that he could get back to his all-star form, his play on the court said otherwise. Any explosiveness that he had was taken away by injuries, and he had become more of a spot-up shooter. I mentioned this in my Jimmy Butler video, but if you want to get a good idea of how Griffin was in 2021, just listen to how Heat play-by-play commentator Eric Reed talks about him.
Blake Griffin, a career average of almost 22 points per game this year. Johnny's under 14 points per game. He is just 1 of 4 from the field. He hasn't even gotten near a free throw attempt. For his career, he's averaged almost 7 free throw attempts a game. This year, taking just 3 free throws a game. Once an above-the-rim guy, he's just a 3-point spot-up shooter now.
The writing was on the wall for both Griffin and the Pistons. His contract was one of the worst in the league, and the Pistons had gone back to being a basement dweller after the Griffin-Drummond experiment flopped. So both sides just needed to part ways and wash their hands of this whole stint. He obviously wasn't going to get traded because of his terrible contract and injury history, so the Pistons eventually bought him out. Despite his recent struggles, there were still teams interested in his services. Potential suitors included Portland, Golden State, and Miami because the Heat were in conversations with everyone, including you and me. But Griffin would decide to take his talents to Brooklyn, joining a roster that was already filled with current and former stars. He even got to reunite with former Lob City teammate Deandre Jordan, which was actually one of the reasons he chose to sign with the Nets. I think it also helps that the Nets were one of the best teams in the league. They had the trio of KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, along with some good role players. Griffin would only add to this depth, as he wouldn't have to be relied on for star-level offense. He could just be more of a stretch 4 who could hit a couple threes and make some plays every now and then. He fit in much better with this role. His scoring numbers dipped just a bit, but he was much more efficient. Hell, he was even dunking again after going more than a year without rocking the rim. This showed that Griffin still had something to give to a championship-level team, even if it wasn't the All-NBA levels of production that we'd just seen 2 years prior. This continued throughout the playoffs, as Griffin was named the starting center for the Nets after primarily coming off the bench. Although he wouldn't do much in their first-round win over the Celtics, his presence would certainly be felt in the conference semifinals. His numbers jumped from around 5 points per game against Boston to 12 points in the 7-game slugfest against Milwaukee. He was doing his part, but by Game 7, the Nets were completely out of gas. Both Kyrie Irving and James Harden had missed games with injury, Joe Harris lost his touch, and KD couldn't carry the team on his back. He was really damn close though, if only his foot was just a little smaller. The Bucks would go on to win the NBA Finals against a guy that we'll talk about later. Even if this team didn't live up to expectations, Griffin looked to be in a much better place. He was playing meaningful basketball again, and he showed that he could still give a winning team valuable minutes. He also noted that it was nice to have some positivity go his way in Brooklyn after years of negativity towards his contract, injuries, and reputation. The 6-time All-Star would re-sign with the Nets, but he wouldn't be able to keep up the level of production that we saw in the playoffs. In fact, his play was so bad that he was taken out of the rotation completely after starting the first 17 games of the year. His minutes were instead being given to guys like LaMarcus Aldridge and Paul Millsap, just a real who's who of washed big men. He was able to find his way back onto the floor, but he wasn't nearly as impactful as he was before. Griffin averaged career lows in almost every stat, scoring only 6 points per game in 17 minutes a night. Not much would change in the playoffs, as the Nets would get swept by Boston, and Griffin only appeared in 2 games. Blake Griffin would sign with the Boston Celtics in what would end up being his final NBA season. Boston had issues with forward depth because of injury, and Griffin was able to be on a team that was a championship contender. He was a little better than his last year in Brooklyn. There were a handful of good shooting nights for him, and he even dunked a couple times, but he was never meant to be a consistent part of Boston's rotation. Once they got healthy, he spent most of the time on the bench. He only appeared in 1 game for Boston in the 2023 playoffs, and the Celtics would end up bowing out to the 8th-seeded Miami Heat in the conference finals. After going unsigned throughout the 2024 season, Blake Griffin announced his retirement from the NBA at the age of 35. His career was filled with plenty of highs, but many lows as well. Thankfully, he seems to be at peace with how his NBA career turned out, and he's set to be a part of Prime's coverage of the NBA next season. It'll be cool to see a younger player's perspective on the game, but it does suck that he went out somewhat early. The injuries ended up dealing him in robbing him of any sort of longevity in this league. Unlike Deandre Jordan, he also didn't really come close to winning a championship, which isn't the case for his final Lob City co-star. Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards of all time. He was already establishing that before he got to LA. His ability to dish the ball was matched by few, and he was also one of the better defensive guards in the league. So when he was traded to the Clippers in 2011, it was a match made in heaven. He was the perfect guy to bring the most out of Blake Griffin and Deandre Jordan. With the addition of Paul, the Clippers finally had a core worth building around, and they had the most success in franchise history up to that point. However, like we've established, the Clippers were never able to reach the conference finals during this stretch. By 2017, they had suffered another first-round exit, and there were concerns growing around Paul's age, contract demands, and recent injury history. So instead of paying the 32-year-old All-Star, they opted to trade him to Houston. This paired him with fellow All-NBA guard James Harden. There was some concern with this pairing, as both guys worked best with the ball in their hands, so people wondered what the other would do without the ball. It was safe to say that these concerns didn't last long, as the 2018 Rockets would end up being arguably the best offense in the league. They shot and made the most threes in the NBA because of Mike D'Antoni's 5-out offense and focus on iso ball between Paul and Harden. CP3 didn't look like he was losing a step anytime soon. He was able to average 19 points and 8 assists despite not being the clear-cut first option. The Rockets finished with the best record in the NBA, setting a new franchise record for wins with 65. They were able to easily take care of business against the Wolves and Jazz. Paul even scored 41 points in the closeout game against Utah, but the real test would come in the conference finals. They would match up against the Warriors super team, but it really looked like Houston could win the series. They actually managed to build a 3-2 series lead, and Paul's contributions were a major reason for that. This was his first trip to the conference finals, but the higher stakes didn't affect his play. Game 5 seemed to be more of the same. He was taking over in the fourth, hitting clutch shots until one wrong landing instantly sapped any hope and optimism that the Rockets had. Paul would injure his hamstring, something that he had already been dealing with throughout the year. He would miss Games 6 and 7, and Houston went cold at the worst time, missing out on the finals once again. It isn't crazy to say that the Rockets would have won the finals if Paul was healthy. They took the Warriors to the brink, and that team easily swept the Cavs in the finals. There was no reason to think that Houston wouldn't be back. Paul played well, and he was given a 4-year, $160 million contract as a result. However, the Rockets wouldn't be able to replicate their success from the previous year. Paul was still playing alright, even if his numbers did dip a little. He also continued to miss time due to that lingering hamstring injury. Houston won 14 less games, and they finished 4th in the West. After defeating the Jazz in the first round, they would match up against Golden State for the 4th time in 5 years. This series was more of the same for Paul. He had a game or two where he would step up, but more times than not he was inefficient offensively, and him and Harden spent a lot of time trying to foul bait. They lost to their boogeyman in 6 games, and the end was nearing for the duo of Paul and Harden. The relationship between Harden and Paul was falling apart, so the Rockets needed to make a move to resolve this issue. Eventually, Paul and an assortment of draft picks were shipped off to OKC in exchange for Russell Westbrook. It seemed like Paul's career would start to wind down at this point. The Thunder looked like they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league since they had just traded Russell Westbrook and Paul George. But, to the shock of many, this team turned out to be pretty good. Chris Paul had a great bounce-back year, making the All-Star game and being named to the All-NBA second team. He remained healthy throughout the year, and he helped OKC finish with a 44-28 record in the COVID-shortened season. Although the Thunder would go on to lose to the Rockets in 7 games, CP3 had a great series and season. The Thunder were able to capitalize on this performance from Paul, getting another first-round pick from Phoenix in exchange for the 35-year-old guard. This seemed like a great fit for Paul, as in the bubble the Suns finally found some form of success that had been missing in Phoenix for over a decade. They had begun to build a nice young core, and Paul would be the piece that brought everything together. Sure enough, this team was able to live up to their potential in the 2021 season. The evolution of the core of Booker, Ayton, Johnson, and Bridges, along with additions like Paul and Jay Crowder, propelled the Suns to their best season in 11 years. I think this really shows how impactful Paul truly is, as his first years with the Clippers, Rockets, Thunder, and Suns have all been successful. It shows that he can bring the best out of anyone. Paul finished with his second consecutive All-Star and All-NBA selections, and the Suns finished with 51 wins and the second best record in the West. Their first challenge came against the defending champion Lakers. Unfortunately for Paul, he was never truly 100% in this series because of a shoulder injury he suffered in Game 1. He still played through it, and Devin Booker was a man possessed, sending Phoenix to the second round. With a much healthier Paul, the Suns were able to sweep the Nuggets, booking a date against the hobbled Clippers in the conference finals. Although he did miss the first 2 games of this series due to protocols, he was able to come back in Game 3, and he didn't miss a beat. In a rather poetic way, he would drop a 41-point masterpiece in Game 6, ending the Clippers season, in LA. For the first time in his career, Paul was going to play in the NBA Finals. This would be his chance to finally capture the NBA championship that had eluded him for so long. He was still hooping, and the Suns had more than proven themselves to be a championship-level team that could come through in close games. This feeling would intensify when the Suns were able to go up 2-0 against the Bucks in the finals. It was only a matter of time now. After all, only 4 teams in NBA history had come back from being down 2-0 in the finals. Paul himself had been on the wrong side of a blown 2-0 lead 3 times before, but this surely meant that it couldn't happen again, right? Yeah, about that. Giannis was just unstoppable in this series, and the Bucks were able to adjust following Game 2. Paul was still great for the most part, but there was just no stopping Giannis. What else can you do when a guy drops 50 points and has one of the best blocks in finals history to close out the series? It was a rough end to a great season, and there was reason to believe that the Suns would be on the right end of things next year. At the beginning of the 2022 season, Paul stated that he was addicted to playing in the NBA Finals ever since he got a taste of playing in them. With how Phoenix played in 2022, this addict could get another taste of that wonderful drug. The Suns were one of the best offensive and defensive teams in the league. Their young players continued to develop, their depth was strong, and Paul showed no signs of slowing down at nearly 37 years old. All of this helped the Suns finish with a 64-18 record. Not only the best record in the league, but the best record in Suns history. Their first round defeat of the Pelicans would merely be a formality, and the Mavericks weren't supposed to be any different. The Suns once again built up a 2-0 lead, but it still wasn't enough. Even after going up 3-2, they still couldn't get the job done. They lost by a combined 60 points in Games 6 and 7. The entire Suns team shrunk, and they had no answers for Luka Doncic and the Mavs shooters. This is also where we got the infamous Chris Paul hits a huge 3 to cut the lead to 42. As funny as this is, it is kind of sad that this is what is most remembered about Paul's time in the Valley. After one of the most embarrassing losses in NBA history, the Suns looked to be in desperation mode. The 2023 Suns weren't nearly as effective or impactful as they were the previous year. Their offense had taken a nosedive, and they were only 4 games above 500 by the time the trade deadline came around. This is also when Paul really started to lose a step. He still wasn't bad or unplayable, but he wasn't playing at an all-star level like he had been for his entire career. The injuries had also started to pile up, causing him to miss 23 games. So, with Phoenix underperforming, why not destroy your future for Kevin Durant? This did help them slightly improve and finish with a 46-36 record, and some saw them as a dark horse contender because of the talent in their starting lineup. The Suns were able to once again easily dispatch of the injury-prone Clippers in round 1, and Paul played about as well as he did during the regular season. But the good times wouldn't last long, as the 38-year-old Paul would suffer another lower body injury in round 2. His season would end thanks to a groin injury, and the Suns would fall in 6 games to the eventual champs. After another lost season, the Suns didn't see Chris Paul in their future. He was still expected to be paid around $30 million, and his recent injury history and decline didn't justify that contract. CP3 would soon be shipped to the Wizards in exchange for Bradley Beal, and this is where Chris Paul's time playing for contenders would come to an end. He would be flipped to Golden State, giving us a duo that would have been unstoppable a decade prior. Nothing much came from this though. He was still missing games due to injuries, his play continued to decline, and the Warriors wouldn't even make it past the play-in. Paul only scored 3 points in Golden State's blowout loss to the Kings. He would be waived following the 2024 season, and he would sign with the Spurs, where he resides today as of the writing of this video. He wasn't bad in his first year in San Antonio, and the Spurs possibly could have gotten into a playoff spot if Wemby didn't go down with a blood clot, but I'm sure they're okay with missing out now. At 40 years old, Paul still hasn't given any notion to retiring. He still feels like he's in it and has something to give. It's admirable for sure, even if he likely will never capture that elusive NBA title that he's missed out on for his entire Hall of Fame career. The story of these 3 after they left LA presents us with 3 different kinds of players. Not necessarily in skill set, but in career trajectory. What makes it so interesting is that they are all dramatically different. You have a guy who quickly saw a star fade, but found himself in the right place, winning a championship. A guy who arguably had the highest ceiling and showed potential of staying in the spotlight for much longer, only to leave because of injuries. And a guy who played at a star level for much longer than most, but could never achieve the ultimate goal because of a series of unfortunate events. While they may have been different separately, together, they were damn fun to watch and gave us plenty of highlights that'll be watched for years to come. But that's going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments whose career you all would have picked. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch y'all later.
Watch Reddick. The lob. The jam.
The beautiful thing is you had shooters running on each wing, and Chris never looked at DJ until he threw the pass.